like this. Tie me to a chair, subconsciously surrendering.
Thank you for tuning to NeptuneKnives. In a new series, I'm going to be adding videos regularly to. I'm going to call this Tactical Knife Talk, or a TKT video. So I have my 7-point reviews, and then these Tactical Knife Talk videos. And these videos are going to be more just kind of me bantering, just discussing theories and ideas and concepts when it comes to knives. 2 points I want to hit today on this video, just keep the video nice and short, is these 2 features that we look at and we think that these are perhaps now based on a trend, but in reality actually it is, to me, kind of a flaw. So those 2 features today we're going to talk about are the dual thumb studs and then a guard, sort of like a full-on choil or guard that you would see something like on a strider, and perhaps even then the concept of like a flipper. And I can understand how it's beneficial if there is a design element. In this case, for example, on the strider, where would this lockup stop pin be, and would it interrupt the blade tang? You know, there is obviously some kind of design element to this small area that, you know, it creates. You'd have to make a certain shape here to allow all those parts. Regardless, this concept, even though it's good, you can use it as a method of deployment. The problem here is that it gets caught on things. Now, this is perfect for people who are normal EDC, normal people, someone not perhaps surviving or using this in an intense situation where perhaps on a strap, perhaps in your bag, and this gets caught on things and your knife will pop open. So the problem with that is just if it's in your backpack, I've had it open on many occasions, and I don't really suggest you try this, but you can if you want. You know, put it in your backpack, put it in a pocket, drop it down into something, and just do your regular stuff. And there will be at some point where you go in to grab the knife, pull it out, and it's open, and you could cut yourself. A Spyderco hole, you know, really is, in my opinion, superior. And it's a feature that I wish Spyderco would just openly let the knife community, knife makers use. You know, I don't think that's something that they should try to own. I think at this point we all know it's a Spyderco hole. We all respect that Spyderco came up with that concept. When you see a lot of knives with this dual thumb stud, you think of Hinder and Strider and perhaps the influence, and now a lot of knife makers utilize this method. And sometimes it can sit very, you know, flush or very deep into the knife to where hopefully that isn't an issue. But regardless, just having that thumb stud, that is a corner for something to catch on. A piece of fabric, a molly strap, something to where if it gets caught, your knife will open up. And in that sense, I feel that that is a flaw, because when you're not paying attention and you have this hooked maybe somewhere improper, you know, you're not just carrying it in a traditional way, in a simple, you know, straightforward, you know, let's EDC it type of lifestyle, then this could cause you some risk of cutting yourself. So I personally don't really like dual thumb studs. I think it's fine just to have the stop pin in there, and just have a traditional frame lock will be strong enough. I mean, let's look at the Coastal Triad lock, very strong, and it doesn't have any kind of dual contact method. So that's one thing I think people miss when it comes to tactical knives. I think that is a feature that actually should be avoided. So we all love finger guards, and the concept of them is not really necessary to explain. If the handle's made properly and has enough bulk here, your hand will not move in that fleshy part of your hand, and your hand will not slide the blade in thrusting motions. But something people perhaps fail also to notice, and it's another tactical design feature, and I've always been a big proponent of this, is that sort of safety choil that if you, on the folding knives especially, if it doesn't lock and it fails to, you know, engage, and your finger is here, that it catches your finger and doesn't cut your finger, there is that cutout. Same thing with like on the Strider. This was a big feature I feel that I personally enjoy, and I still do, but there is a way and technique to do it. And what a good example is a Fultz Minimalist. Now, I don't know how many people have actually ever slashed or tried to take a swipe at, let's say, fabric, okay? When you have a small utility blade, such as this TKT minimalist. You guys don't have to believe me, just test this. Take your pocket knife that has some sort of choil that's integrated like this. And on this one here is exaggerated because you have this really small blade, so when you go to cut something, this snags. This dull, large portion will just get caught, and you'll be doing this and tugging on the fabric, and it's like you won't be able to utilize that whole belly. You'd have to like cut into the fabric trying to avoid this area. And it becomes especially a weakness on smaller blades. But then when it comes to a larger blade, it's the same issue. If you've ever, again, swiped at anything fabric related when you are holding a knife like this, and you will catch this on the fabric and it'll get caught, jeans, you start thinking now more heavy duty materials, and instead of slashing through, it'll snag. And so you'll see on a lot of tactical knives, perhaps ones that are more well thought out, like on the Hinder. You'll see this on some Warren Thomas knives. You'll see this on a ProTech even. It's a concept that's more common than you think, but a lot of us maybe don't notice it, is that this cutout right here, where the blade is exposed, like it doesn't have a solid, how do I say, a solid section that's defined like on a Strider. That is more tactical, because then when you cut at something, this area will just snag. It's like another point, and just grab it and cut through. And so in slashing motions, this is more effective because you can't really control. I mean, in the random situation in fighting, it's so chaotic. You can't really control exactly where, when you cut at someone, you're going to hit them here or here, here. You know, it's something that, this is why perhaps a feature people don't realize. It kind of serves then as twofold. And even on like my knives and stuff, I've come up with this idea of making like an integrated choil. But I've done the same thing there. So this is where, for example, it was a key thing when I was designing the art buyer, that I avoided that because I didn't want to slash at something and have it get stuck. And then same thing on the Invictus. I created this idea of, I guess, an integrated choil, like same concept, but actually more grippy, more of a defined choil that when you grab, your hand won't slide, compared to like a Hinder. But at the same time, the edge is exposed, so when you slash, being that this blade is not longer, it won't snag and it'll still slice through. But there's also a proper way to do a flipper, and then this is also something important to realize, that integrated choil or flipper. Now if you look at like a Sabo, a lot of people, this is a new thing we're seeing sometimes, and I think it does look kind of funny, and maybe people don't realize it too. This sort of fat finger choil, this sort of guard that's very ugly and very round and obtuse, compared to a nice defined finger guard, we have this sort of like stubbier one. And you see them on knives. I think some bench blades now have it, and this is actually the more proper way, that if you're going to do a guard, there's a reason why. If you look at now this Sabo, this was a tactical knife designed with fighting in mind. The thing is, again, when it's this more shaped like this and you swipe at something, there's less likelihood that it'll snag on a direct like kind of point, where it's like this sort of sharp corner where it can snag on, and this one is more likely to hopefully roll off. This could be even more rounded, and you've seen that on some new folders. And so that is another concept, that when you have that guard there, it has to be to where when you slash at something, either you have the exposed edge like that, or you have this sort of rounded off guard, especially when it comes to then a smaller fixed blade or a smaller knife, like a Coastal Mini Tough Light. This feature here of having this solid choil, that really limits the ability for you to use the entire blade, especially this area here when doing cuts like that, depending on what you're cutting through. So that's my 2 points to discuss today, and hope you guys found it interesting. This is the SK2. And so the same concept here is, rather than having a finger guard, which could snag, the round portion, obviously when you slash, it would just roll right off. So this is a fighting knife specifically. And this is kind of like the completed sketch. So at the moment it's not there yet, but you can see, you know, when it comes to making a knife, custom knife from scratch, you know, it's a lot more involved than I think even I have ever realized, perhaps. You know, and I've been guilty of that, like where you don't realize, you look at this large piece of metal going from that to this, you can see how much has to come off. Let me just look at that.